Hey there, you awesome people. I hope your day has been nothing short of fantastic. Welcome back to a brand new episode of What If Deku Had Green Lightning. Don't forget to shower some appreciation onto the incredible author responsible for this fanfiction. The link is conveniently waiting for you in the description box down below. If you're totally vibing with this what if scenario, drop me a comment and let your thoughts be known. And while you're at it, don't miss out on other mind-blowing what ifs on this channel. Alright, without further ado, let's dive straight into this video. Nejire was humming happily as she made her way through 1A's dorm. Whilst it was common to see the light blue-haired girl within the first year's dorm, Izuku wasn't around, which caused some worry within some of his classmates. "Wait, Nejire-senpai." A boy with dark blue hair called out as a boy with red and white hair followed, flanked by another boy with a sharp black haircut. "Oh hello, Ida Todoroki. I don't believe I've met you. I'm Nejire, Izuku's girlfriend," she said as she bowed to the boy. "Greetings. I am honored to meet a third-year student as strong as yourself. I am Inasa Urashi. I love your energy," he announced, bowing rapidly. "Well, I need to grab his laptop, so I'll see." "Wait, Nejire, we want to know what's going on with Izuku," Todoroki cut her off. "Oh, he's at a hospital." "What? Why?" Ida was shocked at this, and Nejire's cheery nature, but she continued. "He's looking after a little girl. 1, 2, 3. He did what? How dare he break UA's rules and perform such acts? No, it's a girl we saved on the big mission with our work studies." "Oh? I'm pretty sure he's managed to more or less adopt her." "Wait, what?" Todoroki chimed in now, and Nejire giggled at their confusion. "So, we saved a little girl named Iri, who has grown an attachment to Izuku, who happens to be immune to the effects of her erratic quirk, and seeing as he is significantly ahead of the class in most subjects, Nezu has cleared him to presently look after Iri, until she is cleared to leave the hospital, so he will be sent any bonus work. And I imagine Nezu sees it as a learning experience of sorts." Oh, do you guys have any fruit I can steal?" Nejire suddenly diverted and Todoroki responded. "We always have apples because of Tokoyami, along with various other fruits." "Perfect. Alright, mind getting me some whilst I grab his laptop?" "Not at all. We will do our best to help Izuku in his mission," Ida responded as he and the boys turned back downstairs. "I admire Izuku's passion and determination more and more. How incredible," Urashi announced. Todoroki stiffened ever so slightly, however Urashi seemed to pick up on this. "Do not fear, Todoroki, I admire you more," he announced with no apparent awareness of the implications. They were lucky Aizawa-sensei wasn't around to yell at them for setting off the fire alarms. Nejire brought the basket of various fruits in one hand, and tucked the laptop under the other, as Aizawa-sensei drove her to the hospital. "Thank you for the lift, sensei." Nejire bowed as she stepped out of the vehicle. "No worries. Now go before I regret it," he said as he went to a nearby pharmacy. A certain blonde-haired idiot lost their voice again, and he needed to pick up more medicine. Nejire hummed happily as she went up the stairs to the room the receptionist had directed her to. There were a lot of stairs and she definitely wasn't half flying the whole way up in anticipation. Whilst Izuku was looking after Iri, he had sent a few photos of the little girl to Nejire, including some of the coloring they did together, a few picture books that he was using to teach Iri the basics of hiragana. Nejire had to admit, it was adorable, and it only made her love for her boyfriend stronger. Which to some extent was dangerous as it was at the level of sudden hugs. Random and very strong hugs. Somehow Izuku managed to land them on their feet every time. It was kind of an art form. That was besides the point. She reached the door and began knocking. "Alright Iri, trust me, the person that is coming in is really nice. She was part of the mission to rescue you. You don't have to talk if you don't want to, but I want you to try and introduce yourself." "Alright. Okay," Iri replied optimistically, determination glinting in her eyes. Nejire giggled as Izuku opened the door. "Crouch down to her level and introduce yourself. And give her an apple while you're at it, and tell her it matches her eyes. She loves that," Izuku whispered to Nejire before kissing her cheek and sitting back down on the bed. Nejire smiled and went up to Iri, who was shaking ever so slightly out of nervousness, but Izuku rubbed her head slightly, and she took a deep breath before looking at Nejire. "Hi, I'm Iri. What's your name?" Iri asked, looking at Nejire as she introduced herself. "Hi cutie. My name is Nejire. I brought some fruit for you with me, but I think you'll like the apples best because they match your eyes," she said as she pulled one of the apples out of the basket. Iri's eyes sparkled as she grabbed the apple with a little drool, but Nejire couldn't help but notice the lack of smile on her face, despite her apparent excitement. Yeah. Overhaul lingers in her mind still. "I'm not quite sure what could help though," She's almost stable enough to have around people, as long as I'm there though, Izuku whispered to her as he noticed Nejire's smile falter ever so slightly. She seems content and happy, but she doesn't smile. Nejire's heart strained hearing that, but Izuku gently squeezed her hand before Eri got their attention again. Thank you, Ms. Nejire. Oh, you can just call me Nejire, sweetie. Nejire said, gently stroking Eri's hair. Eri leaned slightly into the touch subconsciously, and Nejire smiled. Do you like Nejire, Eri? Izuku asked the little girl, who nodded despite still eating away at the apple. She's surely nice. Eri said, and Izuku chuckled slightly. It's bad manners to talk with your mouth full, Eri, Izuku told her. Oh, sorry. Eri said after swallowing her apple, bowing slightly. Izuku smiled gently and hugged her side into him. It's alright, Eri, you didn't know and you're learning, that's the important thing. He encouraged and Nejire hummed in agreement. Say, Eri, do you mind if Nejire spends the day with us? Izuku asked this kind of suddenly, and Nejire was really surprised, curious as to why. However, that didn't stop her from smiling at Eri's response. She seems nice and you said it would be get used to being around more people. And you trust her, so I think that should be fine, Eri said thoughtfully, staring deep into the bite she made in her apple as she thought. Izuku smiled. I'm glad you like her, she's my best friend. I'm your Izuku shut her up by putting his hand over her mouth, whilst Eri was still distracted by the apple. One step at a time. It took me close to an hour to explain what a friend is to her, Izuku whispered to Nejire, who clenched her fists. The shadow of Overhaul was so much worse than what most of the other heroes and students even realized. Once we get to that point, we'll also bring Mario and Tamaki, Izuku whispered, and Nejire understood his reasoning. Well, your best friend is really pretty, Izuku. Do you think so too? Eri asked Izuku with pure innocence as she looked at him curiously, causing him to chuckle. Yes I do. A few hours of chatting and doing various small activities with Eri later, and the young girl fell asleep up against Izuku's side, as was the norm. Nejire shuffled to the other side, and cuddled her boyfriend. I've missed you these past few days. But I'm really proud of you, to dedicate your time to this, Nejire told him, kissing his cheek. He smiled, and looked down to Eri. Yeah. It's definitely worth it. So you've more or less adopted her? Nejire asked. This was the big one really. Maybe. Izuku responded shyly, but we haven't explained it to her like that. Little steps. Nejire chuckled and snuggled into him some more. It's alright, I'd love to help take care of the little one here. She could absolutely be our adopted daughter. Nejire announced excitedly, resisting the urge to shake him. Thank you for understanding, Nejire. Oh, don't worry about it, Izu. So what'll be her conditions for now? Legal loophole stuff. Basically, I'll be with her in the hospital until she is more stable, at which point she can move into the dorms with me, and I'll technically be her legal guardian until I'm 18, at which point it will no longer be a technicality. Technically. Do you really want to ask Nezu about it? Fair. She seems to be looking forward to it, but for now we have to get her stable enough. There are a few milestones. One is the growth on her forehead. Her adorable little horn. Do you know how sharp that used to be? It was not pleasant. Regardless, it is steadily shrinking. She doesn't hide behind me if it's people I trust, but otherwise she is still quite nervous, and occasionally has panic attacks if I leave her alone for too long. Extreme attachment. Yeah, so we've steadily been introducing her to Aizawa-sensei, since he'll be around a lot, and you for obvious reasons. But probably Nezu at some point because he'll help teach her as well. Hopefully we can get to the point where she'll be able to sleep peacefully without me actively cuddling her or stroking her hair. I'm jealous. I want to be cuddled and have my hair stroked by you when we sleep. We can cuddle now, Izuku offered his pouting girlfriend. Yay. A few hours passed when Eri woke up and Izuku thought of something. Hey Eri, can I leave you here with Nejire while I go get us something for lunch? Izuku asked, smiling broadly at the little girl. I don't know. Eri said nervously, gripping her hospital dress slightly as she said that. Nejire seems nice, but what if he? Well, for one, he can't. He's in the strongest prison in the world at the moment, Izuku reassured the little girl as he hugged her side into him. And two, I trust Nejire with not only my life, but my heart. And she cares for you a lot as well. Do you think you can give trusting Nejire a go? I promise if you don't like it you won't have to do it again anytime soon. You trust her with your heart. What does that mean? Eri asked, tilting her head inquisitively. I guess the easiest way to describe it is that I trust her with the most important things in my life. I'll explain more some other time, as you get more adjusted. What are some of the most important things in your life? Eri asked, her eyes brimming with curiosity. Well, I guess my family, friends, my feelings, and you, he smiled at Eri. Eri, whilst not smiling back, seemed elated by this. Alright then. I'll do it. Iri proclaimed, looking determined before she looked to Nejire. I'll trust you. Nejire giggled and Izuku smiled before he grabbed his wallet and phone. I'll be back in less than an hour, okay? Iri nodded happily as Nejire sat next to the white-haired girl. Alright, see you soon. Izuku called as he closed the door behind him. Nejire smiled to the little girl that was now looking curiously at her. Your hair is really pretty, Iri said, admiring it, and Nejire giggled in response. Thank you. So is yours. You really think so? Iri asked, clearly a little insecure about her hair color. It looks really pretty. Hey, do you want me to help you style it? What does that mean? Iri asked again, her head tilting to the side. Nejire giggled a little at the adorable scene in front of her, before responding, it changes how your hair is decorated, let me show you. Nejire pulled out her phone and scrolled through a few images of different hairstyles, before Iri's eyes noticeably lit up at one of them. It was a photo of someone with a princess crown braid around their head ending in a ponytail. This one? Nejire asked her, and Iri nodded rapidly. Nejire giggled before telling Iri to turn around, and Iri began humming a happy song, as she began leaning slightly into Nejire's touch, as she gently braided the little girl's hair. Thank you, Nejire. Iri mumbled partway through. It's alright, sweetie, it's a lot of fun to do. Nejire said to the little girl, plus you look even cuter now. Can I do your hair? Iri asked shyly. Of course. I'll teach you how. Nejire said happily, and Iri bounced slightly in excitement. Can you come again sometime? And do my hair a different way? Iri asked. I'd love to, little one. Nejire smiled at her. Iri giggled happily as she leaned against Nejire. The little girl may not be able to smile yet, but was definitely well on her way. Izuku and Nejire were spending time with Iri, who had steadily been growing attached to Nejire as well, whilst also building her own confidence. Whilst she still couldn't be left alone, she was happy to be with either of the couple and other people she had been introduced to prior, such as Aizawa-sensei, that it was apparent the couple liked her, trusted, or Iri had spent time with previously. Other people that Iri had been introduced to she was tolerant of. Still, it was much better than it used to be. This was useful as both Izuku and Nejire had commitments in advance for the upcoming school festival. And so Mirio and Tamaki, who were doing something but would have Iri help them practice, became Iri's third and fourth favorite people. It also gave them a chance to introduce the concept of love and closer relationships to her. It was a very long afternoon, but she definitely learned from it. They hadn't yet introduced parental love, that would be saved until a later date, and same with sibling love. She seemed really excited every time Izuku and Nejire expressed little affections, but soon it became normalized, and Iri paid it no mind. On his part, Izuku had been informed by his friends that they were doing a musical performance, and unfortunately for him, Bakugo had ratted out his musical skills for flute, and showed a clip of Izuku performing at their old school, so now Jiro had written him a part into the performance, so he had to practice with the band. Somehow she had written flute into her pop rock piece, and that was pretty impressive in its own right. And so he had a solo in the piece. That was not something he was looking forward to. But he had a feeling a big performance like this could help Iri finally break out of the last fragments of her shell. So after negotiating with Aizawa-sensei and Nezu, they had said that Iri would be able to do a trial visit with Class 1, whilst Izuku's parents were there as well to introduce other caretakers, and introduce her to more concepts. So the first event was the 1 visit. It was decided that she would go to 3A's dorm to sleep the night as well, before returning to the hospital for her final examinations and clearance to leave. But for now, Mirio, Tamaki and Nejire were running around the Class 1 dorm, with the help of Izuku's adoptive parents, brother, Yoyorozu, and his other friendship group, Iida and Todoroki. Unfortunately, Irashi was busy today. Were currently getting the dorm into shape, whilst Izuku and Aizawa-sensei picked her up, and brought her to Nezu. Izuku had Iri on his shoulders, who had wrapped her arms around the top of his head for balance. It was an adorable little sight. Her eyes gleamed as she looked around the school with wonder, seeing some of the work being done for the school's festival occurring. There were many students from the business course running around and setting up stalls, along with some of the other hero classes setting up various performances, such as 1B setting up their play. Most of 1A were already prepared, it was just Mina forcing the dance troupe to do some extra, along with the effects team doing some last-minute testing. But that wasn't the point. Currently they were in the elevator to the top floor, where Nezu had his office. It didn't take them long to reach the doors, where Aizawa-sensei was about to knock, but Nezu opened it last moment. Izuku's homeroom teacher jumped slightly when the door swung open, as did Iri. However, Izuku knew this was relatively normal behavior as Nezu welcomed them in. Welcome, please take a seat. Tea? Nezu asked as he hopped over to his own seat on the opposite side of the small conference table with a teapot in his paws. He poured 4 cups of tea and placed one in front of each of the other room's recipients. Eri took a look at the warm liquid, sipped it, before pushing it away. "Sorry, Mr. Nezu, it's not very tasty," Eri said, looking down. Izuku rubbed her back and Nezu kept smiling at her. "It's quite alright, Eri. Tea is quite an acquired flavor, so it does take some getting used to sometimes," Nezu said. It was now that Eri was able to get a proper look at Nezu. And she was immediately captivated by the principal. She was gripping the table as she actively resisted the urge to squeeze the small creature. She was bouncing slightly and Izuku noticed this, so he shuffled her onto his lap and she took some deep breaths, calming down rather quick. After that, it didn't take long for their discussion to finish, as Nezu finalized some paperwork with Aizawa-sensei and Izuku, before making their way to the classroom. Izuku opened the door, and they could only hope for the best. A few hours later and all had gone well. Mitsuki and Masaru were proud, and along with Bakugo and Yuirozu, they became highly trusted individuals in Iri's eyes, even if they could never replace Nejire and Izuku. However, soon the inevitable question came. "Izuku, what makes someone your mommy and daddy?" Iri asked innocently. "Well, I guess they're the people that look after you and help you. They don't necessarily have to give birth to you, or be related to you, like my parents. My birth parents died in a crash when I was a little younger than you, at the age of 4, so my current parents are looking after me. But they still love me and I still love them," Izuku explained carefully. He and the little girl were currently alone in the common room. "What kind of love?" Iri asked, looking up to him. "It's hard to describe. It's not the same as attraction like Nejire and I or Tamaki and Mirio, but it's more a feeling of security, warmth and trust. Someone who will look after you and love you no matter what. So the way you and Nejire make me feel?" Iri asked, seeming a little excited. Izuku wiped away the tear in his eye. "I suppose so, yes. Does that make you to my parents then?" "If you'd like, Iri," Izuku said, carefully watching her response. She visibly lit up and hugged him, "So I can call you Papa?" "Of course, little one," Izuku hugged her tight. He wiped away his own tears as he crushed Iri in the hug, who seemed a little confused but appreciative nonetheless. He would make sure to record Nejire's reaction to being called Mama later. Soon the night came and Izuku carried an exhausted Iri to his dorm room, where he had set up a spare mattress that he could sleep on. "Do you think you can sleep on your own bed tonight? I'll still be in the room and if you need you can lie down with me if you can't sleep. Sound good?" Izuku suggested to Iri. Iri contemplated for a moment before nodding nervously. Izuku smiled her encouragingly, and kissed her forehead goodnight. Iri seemed at peace, but if he noticed the little girl using him as a soft toy in the morning, he had no qualms about it. "Alright Iri, all you have to do is wait at the hospital for a few hours whilst I finish up here, and then I'll join you there. Then, in a few days, I'll bring you back here for the school festival, after which you'll be able to stay with me, alright?" "Alright," Iri said, clenching her fists as she looked at him and gave him one more hug. "Bye Papa, see you later." With that she took Aizawa-sensei's hand, who she had taken to calling Uncle Zawa, and no one was allowed to say no to Iri when she wanted something so adorable, and he guided her to his car, whilst Izuku turned to his classmates. "Alright, let's rehearse." The class had booked out a gym that they used to play. After making sure he was in tune, Izuku had to go through the grueling process of playing for the first time in front of his class. 4 minutes and 1 song later and he was nervously waiting in front of the class who made him give a solo performance of his part. "Dude, that was so good." Kaminari congratulated him as the rest of the class applauded. "We could also use your quirk for special effects as you play." "We could also use Bakugo's quirk," Todoroki commented. "Oh, this is so exciting." Toru and Mina commented together, with one relying on the movements from her dance outfit to convey her emotion. Izuku laughed nervously as he looked at Jiro, who was carefully critiquing him, nodded. "Good, but you don't have to do it so mechanically. Let the music flow, embed the emotion within your notes, within the instrument. Otherwise that was pretty good, let's go as a group," Jiro said as she and the rest of the band group made their way to the stage. Todoroki and the rest of props were discussing how to use various people's quirks, as Mina was drilling the dance troupe to do their steps with more energy. All in all, it was a fairly successful practice. Hopefully the day of the festival would go well. Izuku was rushing out of 1A's dorm at 7 of the morning of the school festival. After dropping Iri off with Nejire, who was looking after the little girl for the morning before he would look after her until he needed to pick some things up from the general store for both the performance and for Iri herself. He had an extra little plan for her, but needed to pick a few things up. He was outside a quaint little cafe shop that he picked up a quick breakfast from when he saw a few people acting shady. "Excuse me, are you visiting the cafe?" The taller, based on his voice, gentleman asked. "Yes." I was just having some breakfast quickly whilst I picked some things up from the store, Izuku responded carefully, gesturing to the bag in his left hand. Oh really? I am going there personally for their world-class tea. It is one of few places in Japan that serves this specific brand of tea, he said, before someone much shorter than him tugged on his coat, equally dressed up. Ah, I apologize, I have rambled too long, and am running late for a significant engagement. I will bid you farewell. As he said this, he began walking down the road, and Izuku could notice he was getting visibly antsier. Wait. This encounter triggered a peculiar memory. Nezu had him, whilst helping Yuri sleep at the hospital, use a pair of headphones and analyze a HeroTube villain. These were not particularly uncommon, however the difference with this guy was that he, whilst not effective, was strong. And incredibly eccentric. As such, whilst he had not committed particularly horrible crimes, he was still wanted for armed assault and armed robbery. Many charges of which. It seemed his only motivation was fame and to go down in history, making him relatively weak. With such a motivation, he didn't really have much drive. What made him dangerous was his quirk. If you couldn't keep track of it, it would quickly overwhelm you. That was made apparent by the heroes that had tried to stop him, none of them permanently incapacitated, but all had significantly reduced potential as heroes. Labrava, on the other hand, was far more dangerous. Whilst she didn't pose a threat physically, it was clear based on the videos where they incidentally dropped hints regarding her quirk, it made Gentle Criminal far more dangerous and capable. Additionally, it seemed the strength of her own emotion affected how strong the quirk effect was. And she clearly had nothing to lose. Her life was dedicated to Gentle Criminal, and after some digging into her past, completely legally of course, he found she was once a notorious hacker that was a hardcore fangirl of the HeroTube villain. With this she was able to track him down, fueled by her devotion. It was a little creepy. But more importantly, she was completely dedicated to him, making her dangerous as she would do anything for him. Wait, Izuku stopped the duo that were trying to run away. You wouldn't happen to have directions to UA from here? Why yes, it's over that direction. Gentle Criminal pointed the opposite way. That confirmed it. Someone who doesn't know would just say they don't, lying only makes sense if he wants to distract. Thank you. I'm sure I'll see you around. Gentle Criminal, Izuku said with a little venom in his voice, causing the duo to freeze. I'll be honest, I didn't want to personally take you in, but it's obvious you are planning on doing something to UA. And unfortunately I have a lot riding on this. I will kindly ask you to leave us alone, and will not bother apprehending you today. Gentle Criminal sighed. I apologize child, but I have far bigger plans in mind that involve your school. Then you leave me no choice, Izuku said, his core pumping through his skin as he gently put down his bag, and jumped at them. A head-on attack that will be obvious to block using his quirk, allowing me to figure out details, and him to underestimate me, Izuku thought as Gentle Criminal did just that. He noticed the slight warp in the air as it was created, however it seemed to blend in naturally before he crashed into it. He reached into it, feeling it. He couldn't help but compare the sensation of it to spiderwebs as he got caught in it. It was definitely not comfortable. Regardless, he saw Gentle Criminal turn away, and he and his partner did away with their coats, as they revealed themselves to a camera Labrava had on her. Izuku could hear him spewing some nonsense about justice and gentlemanliness, but frankly didn't care about it. He had his daughter's smile to save. I'm sorry, but I won't let you disturb Yue. Not today of all days, he said as he jumped backwards before jumping over the top edge of the barrier made. Unfortunately for him, Gentle Criminal slammed several of the air sandwiches down on him, causing him to be crushed into the ground. I apologize, I tend not to prefer resorting to violence and such British methods, but sometimes such measures are necessary. Do not worry, I do not wish to harm anyone. Gentle Criminal bowed before using his quirk to bounce himself and Labrava away. Izuku grimaced as he forced himself through the sandwiching elastic barriers above him, taking some notes. They can be broken with enough force, and it seems that he's able to control them to some extent, after creating them at his hands, so it seems to be touch control with a limit to what he can do. More importantly, it seems he gets brief control over them, until it arrives at his desired location, before naturally dispersing with time. So if Izuku thought as he jumped onto the ground that Labrava and Gentle Criminal had used to bounce away. It didn't go so great, because whilst he did get sent in the same direction, he was very off balance, as he was definitely not used to the feeling of the hyper-powered trampoline mode of transportation. He quickly looked around and with his high-powered eyes, he locked onto the location of Gentle Criminal and Labrava. With a loud crash in the air, he propelled himself with a blast of lighting from his feet towards the flying villains, who were really just falling with extra style. He crashed into both of them and thought fast. Labrava's quirk clearly was a last resort item, and as such clearly required some form of activation. Such quirks were normally not touch activated, nor were they able to accidentally activate, so it presumably was voice activated. There would need to be some personal connection, which presumably grew stronger as they spent more time together. He opted to send a powerful charge through Labrava, causing her to be knocked out immediately. This, unfortunately, enraged Gentle Criminal. "You violent hero. How could you?" he screamed as he made the ground bouncy, making it impossible for Izuku to keep a grip on the two. Gentle Criminal, taking advantage of Izuku's surprise and lack of balance, kicked him into the air, and then kneed him across the sky, and Izuku ended up being thrown into a tree, crashing it over. However, he quickly rolled backwards over and landed skidding on his hands, before springing off of them towards Gentle Criminal, feet first. Gentle Criminal created a barrier, however Izuku created a spike using his quirk beneath his feet. It sent him flying through the first elastic barrier, but Gentle Criminal was quick to create multiple barriers which Izuku was unable to penetrate, launching him back. Turning in the air, Izuku faced Gentle Criminal who was about to knee him again, but Izuku managed to grab the knee and redirected it to his left. He saw the slight frustration in Gentle Criminal's face, and noticed the man's left bicep twitch slightly, and quickly reacted with a block at his left rib. The two dropped back down onto the ground, glaring at each other, whilst Gentle Criminal was clearly becoming more agitated. Izuku quickly glanced at his phone, which miraculously wasn't broken, and saw the time. It was a little past 8. The performance was at 9. He sighed and upped his throughput, jumping towards Gentle Criminal. The villain was taken by surprise after the hero went on the offensive, however he was quick to react by creating several layers of elastic air in front of him, and using it to bounce away. Izuku bounced off the air created willingly, and quickly used that to bounce off some trees, towards Gentle Criminal. He could see the faint outline of the various elastic barriers created by Gentle Criminal, and used those to speed him along, bouncing from one to another, until he saw Gentle Criminal back where Labrava was knocked out. Unfortunately, she had woken up, and used her quirk on him. Gentle Criminal's hair stood on end, and a pinkish aura was produced around the villain, and the villain's strength and speed increased dramatically. Izuku was quick to dodge sideways, however Gentle Criminal had quickly made a barrier that he used to bounce off and launch at the hero, and punched Izuku in the face. Izuku flinched and Gentle Criminal used that as an advantage to pull off a combo. After taking 3 blows to the ribs, Izuku was able to break the combo by blocking the next attack with his left arm, before flinging it up and whacking Gentle Criminal upside the head with the elbow. He then went on his own attack, punching the villain in the nose with a powerful right cross, and then using his opponent's chest as a springboard to go up into the sky. It launched Gentle Criminal into the ground, and Izuku shot himself higher into the sky where he could get a good overview. He could see the skull from where he was, or at least some of the walls. It was a good ways through the forest, and looking at his watch, he knew he could definitely make it back with time to spare. He just needed to finish up with Gentle Criminal first. He began spinning in the air as he propelled himself back down to earth, aiming for Gentle Criminal. In response, his opponent created half a dozen barriers that ever so briefly slowed down the hero, however it hardly did anything. Despite that, it was still enough to let Gentle Criminal roll out of the way, before he was thrown up in the air by the force of the cracking ground, as Izuku slammed into it with a high amount of strength. Izuku had quickly pressed a few buttons on the hero app, sending a silent call for police officers to arrest individuals at his position. It would take them a few minutes to arrive, and hopefully he would be able to defeat Gentle Criminal in that time. Gentle Criminal, in response to being thrown up, created another elastic barrier to send him back towards Izuku, using the force of being thrown up against the boy who caused it. However, Izuku was quicker to react. With a high-powered kick to the gut, he sent Gentle Criminal flying back into the same elastic barrier and into the ground with a groan. However, the man still stood up. "You're determined and tenacious. I can respect that. But I have more important things, Gentle Criminal," Izuku said as he turned to the man. "Thank you for the compliment, but we are not done here," Gentle Criminal proclaimed as the aura around him spiked, and he launched at Izuku. Izuku could see the pulled back right fist despite the speed Gentle Criminal moved at. However, Izuku was still faster. The boy pulled a large amount of energy into his right fist, and swung it into Gentle Criminal, who barely managed to block by raising his left arm, and creating a series of small barriers. Gentle Criminal then went through with his original right hook into Izuku's stomach, however Izuku managed to block it by raising his left knee up, and then kicking Gentle Criminal across the jaw, by flicking out his left shin. The unlucky recipient was then sent backwards by the force of the kick, however quickly became more enraged and spun around to face Izuku with a scowl on his face. While still flying backwards, Gentle Criminal pulled his legs to his chest, and then created an elastic barrier behind him. It extended a great distance, however it still launched Gentle Criminal back towards Izuku, who couldn't help but remember his fight against Mirio. Izuku dodged to the left, and Gentle then created another barrier to readjust and launch at Izuku once more. Izuku dodged to the right this time, taking note of where each elastic barrier was, as he used his left hand to release one of his railgun pellets. He moved it to his right hand whilst dodging another attack from Gentle Criminal. Izuku then quickly charged a shot and aimed at the first elastic pad. Railgun shot. He called out as he then fired with a massive crash in the air. Gentle Criminal, after seeing it wasn't going to hit him, paid it no mind before launching at Izuku again. However, Izuku did not dodge and simply stood there. He glared at Gentle Criminal, causing the man to briefly lose his scowl, before winding his punch back whilst flying through the air. Unfortunately for the villain, that was when the pellet happened to bounce off of the elastic barrier to his right. And due to the speed of the pellet, it hit him far before he could even try to hit Izuku. It hit him in the ribs, causing a slight cracking noise as he was thrown up against a tree, before he fell down to the ground. I can respect you for your tenacity. But go to sleep, Gentle Criminal, Izuku said as he sent a final shock through Gentle Criminal with his left hand, causing the man to be knocked out. As he did this, Labrava came up to Izuku's right and began sobbing and punching his arm. It wasn't strong at all. In fact, he was fairly certain Eri was stronger. He listened to her and sighed, grabbing one of her fists, and sending an appropriate shock through it. She promptly froze briefly as her nervous system overloaded, before fainting from the overload. She was still alive, Izuku could still see her breathing, and her pulse was steady, same for Gentle Criminal, and he hated using such a cruel way to incapacitate villains, but it was required if he wanted to get back on time. He picked the two of them up, and quickly flew through the air with each of them on one of his shoulders, as he made his way to the street. He could see the police transports and dropped them off there, filling a quick statement, showing his provisional license and contact information, so he could be interviewed at a more convenient date, before he powered his quirk down, and had to run to his bag. Thankfully, it was still where he left it, and he only had to get to school. Well then. Hopefully he wouldn't be killed by Jiro for this. After he made it onto school grounds, Izuku was able to use his quirk to get to his dorm as quick as he could, before getting changed and grabbing his flute on the way out. He arrived at the correct gym about 10 minutes before they were scheduled to perform. He was promptly scolded by Jiro, Bakugo, Ida and Yoyorozu about being on time. However, all of them, bar Ida, had to go on stage where the curtains were still down. The effects team were in various locations around the gym, the dance troupe prepared in the wings, and the band prepared on stage. The lights went down, the audience hushed, and the curtains opened. Izuku was the count-in. The idea was to use his quirk to illuminate the entire gym as he did so. 1. He called out, tapping his foot, and sending a massive amount of lightning through the gym. It successfully illuminated the entire place in a neon green. 2. He did the same again, and he looked up the back. He knew Eri was currently being looked after by Nejire, and the little girl and her mama were up the back, so Nejire could keep getting her measurements done in preparation for the beauty contest, and Eri wouldn't be overwhelmed by the amount of people. 3. 4. With that, Bakugo started the drum intro and Class 1 began their well-rehearsed show. Izuku, as when he had his parts he held the melody, would use lightning at each note, illuminating the gym and providing a light show. Similarly, Bakugo used his explosions to give his drum parts more oomph as Kaminari had put it, and also to do more light shows. For her part, Yoyorozu was using her quirk on an infinite activation and deactivation cycle, something her and Bakugo had figured out in preparation for this to illuminate her arms with the pattern her quirk produced when she made an item. Kaminari was using his own electricity to add to his own guitar parts, and Jiro used her quirk to boost her singing and guitar. All in all, it was a very flashy concert. Izuku watched Eri on Nejire's shoulders, and felt his smile rise slightly as he saw the little girl really enjoying herself. What made him happiest the entire concert though, was as Aoyama was thrown into the crowd with a combination of Uraraka's quirk, and the efforts of the dance troupe, and began acting as a disco ball. Izuku's flute solo began as his melody took overlapped with Jiro's singing, and the rest of the band acted as support. And Eri smiled. Izuku felt a weight lift off his shoulders as he poured more emotion into his playing, more happiness, more hope, and he could see that Nejire had also noticed the little girl's smile, and was flying happily with Eri still on her shoulders, much to annoyance of Yayu who was still trying to take Nejire's measurements, and to the amusement of Tamaki and Mirio, who were watching the concert from nearby. Izuku's solo ended and he fell back into a secondary melody role for the remainder of the song, and Jiro wrapped up the piece as the curtains closed. Behind the curtains, all of class 1 gathered into a massive group hug. Before Mina took several selfies with the whole class and the various groups involved. Everyone was really happy, and they were quick to put that energy to cleaning up, and it took less than half an hour after Izuku destroyed all the ice, and the rest of the class got to work cleaning various bits and pieces. He knew Eri was currently being looked after by Mirio and Tamaki, whilst Nejire went back to being prepared for her beauty contest. After they finished cleaning up, class 1 is split off into separate activities, and from what he knew, Ida went with Todoroki and Urashi, who was given permission to come along, to go try all the food stands. Uraraka and Asui went together to look at the petting zoo, along with Kota and Tokoyami. Jiro and Kaminari went to watch some of the other music exhibits. And Bakugo and Yoirozu went together to do some of the game stalls that were obviously rigged, but together were going to prove it, and effectively force them to give them things. Izuku would later find out that Yoirozu had ended up winning 15 new stuffed toys for her bed. Bakugo got one as well. But that wasn't the point. Right now, Izuku went off to go find Eri with Mirio and Tamaki, so the two boys could be free to explore on their own. Once he found them, Eri catapulted herself into him out of happiness, and she was bouncing with a beaming smile, as Izuku picked her up and put her onto his shoulders. "So you had fun?" Izuku asked Eri, who nodded very fast. "Yeah. First it was kind of noisy, but then everyone went quiet when the lights went off, but you appeared on stage. And you all started to play together and it sounded really pretty, and your lightning was really cool, and Bakakachi-chan's explosions looked really pretty." Eri said excitedly, and Izuku laughed a little as she continued her little rant. He also let Bakugo that Eri was now calling him Kachi-chan. The follow-up text was from Yoirozu using his phone after Bakugo had shut down briefly out of happiness. As it turns out, Eri ended up getting a cut of the soft toys one as well. They put aside 10, but Yoirozu said she had some ideas for later. But that wasn't important right now. For now, Izuku carried Eri as the papa-daughter duo made their way to the food stalls, whilst Tamaki and Mirio were off to do their act. Apparently they were doing stand-up comedy. By they he meant Mirio. Tamaki was there for special effects basically. Unfortunately he couldn't go because Eri wouldn't be old enough for some of the jokes or language, but he was alright with that. "So, what do you want to try first, Eri?" Izuku asked the little girl on his shoulders as they made their way to the food stall section. Eri's eyes widened as she took in it all, and she instantly noticed the fairy floss. Izuku, unsurprised, went over to the stall and ordered a small tub of it. Eri began bouncing slightly in excitement as she watched Izuku get the fluffy-looking treat. He opened the tub and handed her a small piece of it. When she gripped it though, she immediately crushed it and completely condensed the treat into a small handful of sugar. "Oh," she said disappointedly, pouting slightly. She ate it regardless, and her eyes lit up as she ate the pure sugar. "Papa, can I have more?" she asked excitedly. "Sure thing, sweetie, but this time don't crush it. It will just stay in your hand if you grip it gently, alright?" Izuku told her. Eri nodded and hummed in confirmation as he handed her another piece. Eri quickly stuffed it into her mouth and just held it there, puffing out her cheeks with the treat. "Smile, Snowball," Izuku said as he held his camera up, snapping a photo of the two with him giving a peace sign and Eri just beaming with the sugar on her teeth and fairy floss still in her cheeks. "Snowball?" she asked, still with food in her cheeks. Izuku giggled and responded. "Yeah, because your hair is white like snow, and it sounds cute, like you," he said happily as they continued walking around before they came across something else, Izuku occasionally giving Eri more of the fairy floss. "I like it," she proclaimed happily. "I'm Snowball." "But, Papa, what's snow?" "I'll show you when it's winter, alright sweetie." "Oh, I wanna see it now." "Well, I'll see what I can do," Izuku said, "but for now, what would you like for lunch?" "Katsudon." After getting katsudon, and unfortunately for Eri she couldn't just eat whilst on Izuku's shoulders, so she had to get down. The duo sat down at one of the little tables and ate their lunch. Izuku checked the time. There was still over an hour until the pageant started. "Can I have more of the fairy floss?" Eri asked, leaning over the table to look at the half-full tub. "No, enough sugar for now. Don't worry, I'm sure there'll be more sweets later. Now, where to, kiddo?" Eri gazed intensely at the map Izuku laid on the table, before pointing to one section, there. "Alright, to the rides." Izuku picked Eri up, and together they went to the rides section. It was a chance for the support course students to show off different kinds of skills. Instead they were able to display a large-scale mechanical skills. All he had to do was make sure Eri was kept away from whatever Hatsume had built for this section. Thankfully, Eri didn't make the height limit for the fan-powered triple loop roller coaster. She also seemed thankful about that as they went over to more of the calmer rides. The first one was a simple one, a basic pirate ship ride that swung back and forth and would spin to some extent. Izuku didn't really mind the simplicity, but he could tell Eri was having a blast. It made him smile, seeing her giggling face and watching her swing her arms as the ride went around. She cheered as it swung, spun and sped up. But soon the ride came to a stop, but Eri's giggling did not as Izuku hoisted her onto his shoulders. She pointed to a massive slide that one of the students had designed to keep going and going, by moving the slide itself around, based on the rider's position. Izuku nodded and helped her into the ride, stepping to the side and watching the machine start up. It began with a downhill slant, and then it rotated around in circles a few times before going up and back down again. The whole time he could hear Eri giggling, and the whole time he was smiling brightly. A few rides later, and Eri was much more tired, no longer bouncing as she sat on Izuku's shoulders, instead opting to rest her head on his, using the long fluffy green hair as a pillow of sorts, as she kept intermittently falling asleep. Can't sleep. Gotta. Mama. Eri mumbled and Izuku chuckled slightly, jolting her awake before she quickly returned to her sleepy state. It's alright, you can nap up there, Snowball. I'll wake you when it's Mama's turn, he told her, and the soft rumbling from Eri was an indication that she had quickly taken up that offer. Suppressing the urge to giggle, so he didn't wake her up again, he quickly made his way to Hatsume's stall, borrowed a pair of noise-cancelling earmuffs from her. Power loader had made it a requirement, that if Hatsume wanted to do anything she had to have a plentiful amount of noise-cancelling earmuffs considering Hatsume's tendencies, and carefully put them on Eri as he walked away from most people, to a quieter area. He checked the time, and found there was still about 15 minutes to go. He decided to go sit down somewhere in the audience, somewhere up the back, where Eri on his shoulders wouldn't bother anyone but would also be less loud, chaotic and questionable for her. Regardless, he sat with his phone in one hand, and keeping Eri up with the other, as he heard more and more people mill in. Thankfully, where he was, remained uncrowded and seemed to be a much less shady crowd than those deep in the middle. He was quite thankful for that. He could hear the judges' voices come through the speakers, and figured it was probably a good time to wake up Eri. Shaking her slightly, she lifted her head and rubbed her eyes as she woke up, stretching her arms upwards. She yawned, and Izuku smiled at the cute image above him. She quickly noticed the stage, and it took little to no time for her to wake up completely as she began shaking. Mom is going to perform, she exclaimed excitedly as she took off the earmuffs to watch it all happen. She watched in awe and excitement as the first act, Kendo from Class 1B, gave a short demonstration of her martial arts skills, which was admittedly quite cool, and Izuku could admire the precision and dedication it would take to be able to do what she did. Next was Kanenzaki, and Izuku's first thought was that she seemed a little self-absorbed. What with the giant model hat and all? Eri seemed of the same opinion as she half glared at the support course student. Izuku giggled at the little girl's annoyance. However, the moment Kanenzaki drove the vehicle behind the curtains, Nejire popped out in a dress, beaming as she flew through the sky. Once she made it to the front of the stage, still flying, she gave a slight twirl and flew high into the sky. She flew in various directions, using her quirk to create lasting after effects in the sky. She drifted across the sky in a dreamlike manner, leaving small bursts of her quirks to eventually create a large rose in the sky. Eri was in shock, and Izuku was in awe of the creation as Nejire landed, taking a little bow before skipping behind the curtains. The judges announced voting was going to start, and Izuku, with Eri still on his shoulders, opted to go backstage. After working his way through the many questionable people, and successfully making sure Eri kept her earmuffs on throughout, he made it to the back door where Yayu was standing guard. She recognized him immediately and let him and Eri through, before going back to yelling at all the random people trying to make their way in. He eventually found Nejire's room and knocked on the door. Come in, she called out, and Izuku turned the knob. Nejire was still wearing her dress as she turned around to see who it was. Hello Izu. Eri. Hello. She beamed at them, running to hug them. She hugged Izuku before grabbing Eri of his shoulders and hugging her as well, flying the little girl around the room a little bit, much to her joy. The little girl giggled and laughed even whilst Nejire put her down. You had a good day, sweetie? Nejire asked Eri. MMHM. I got to have fairy floss, and go on rides, and see Papa perform, and you perform as well, she said happily. Ooh, fairy floss. Is there any left? Nejire asked her. Izuku, in response, pulled out the remaining tub of it and handed it to her. Nejire's eyes lit up slightly more as she saw and quickly took it, and began stuffing the fairy floss into her mouth, causing her cheeks to puff out. They all sat on one of the couches in the room, waiting for the results to be announced. Regardless, the little family was happy and content. The two teens hugged Eri, who smiled and tried her best to hug back, even if her hands could only make it about halfway. Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible journey today. I hope you enjoyed exploring the fascinating what-if scenario of Deku. The possibilities were truly mind-blowing. If you found this video entertaining, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel. Your support means the world to me and inspires me to bring you more captivating content in the future. Stay tuned for more exciting what-if stories and other amazing videos coming your way. Until next time, take care, stay curious.